Hello, everyone. As I was saying, my name is José Batista. I am Community and Events Manager at Cogitatio Press, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to our final session of our Ocean and Society Launch webinar series. As you probably are familiar, this is the third and last session in a series of webinars that Cogitatio Press is hosting in honor of our latest journal, Ocean and Society. Today, our session is about an issue that's going to be out very soon, at the beginning of next year in January. It's titled Into the Gendered Blue, New Perspectives on Gender Equality and Participation in Blue Growth. To discuss the themes of this issue, we are joined by a lovely set of speakers today. We're going to start with an introduction and contextualization of this issue by academic editor Kristina Svels, followed by our first paper presentation of the day by Josefin Ekstedt with her paper titled Hindered, Overlooked and Undervalued, Gender Equality in Nordic Blue Economies. We'll move on to our second paper presentation by Ramona Hägele with her paper Transnational Intersectionality at Sea, Gender, Appearance, Ethnicity, Age, and Marine Knowledge Production. And last but not least, we have some guest comments and perspectives by Angelique Brathwaite, who will offer her insight on the overarching themes of this issue as a female actor with over 25 years of experience in the fields of marine science and policy. After all the presentations, we'll have a Q&A, an open Q&A for the audience. There's a dedicated Q&A chat box in this session. You can leave your questions all throughout the webinar in the Q&A box. We'll be collecting them throughout the presentations, and after the last speaker, I'll be directing each question as they come to each individual speaker. One final note before kicking this webinar off: this webinar is being recorded, so if you have a friend or a colleague who could not attend the session, or if you wish to revisit this conversation in the future, this webinar will be available on the Cogitatio Press YouTube page shortly after the series is over. Also, if you want to stay up to date with Ocean and Society's latest articles and issues like this one, you can follow Cogitatio Press in LinkedIn or Cogitatio OAS, that's Ocean and Society, on Twitter or X. So without further ado, I'll introduce Kristina Svels, academic editor of this issue, who will kick us off by introducing the themes and the scope of this special issue that we are presenting. Kristina, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, José. I'm going to start to find my presentation, sharing my page. Here we are. Is that presentation mode now?
Not yet. You need to share your screen first.
Oh, I thought I did that. And now?
There we go. Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone, or good evening, good day. I don't know whereabout you are in the world, but however, I would like to welcome you to this very long the session that we've been looking for a very long time, called the Gender Equality in Blue Growth, Exploring Opportunities and Challenges. My name is Kristina Svels, and I work as a senior researcher at the Natural Resources Institute in Finland. Together with my research colleagues from Sweden, Milena Arya-Schreiber from the University of Gothenburg and Magnus Boström from Linnaeus University in Kalmar, and from Denmark, Kristina Onanian from the Aalborg University, I have had the great honor to guest edit this special issue, Into the Gender Blue, New Perspectives on Gender Equality and Participation in Blue Growth. We are all thrilled to recognize so many participants here today. I saw it was like a minute ago, it was over 30, which I think is really good. who are interested in what we consider one of the top pressing societal challenges tied to our oceans' well-being, namely gender equality, both in marine and maritime sectors. But first, I would like to start to thank the Cogitatio Press and Ocean and Society Journal for inviting us to edit this special issue. I would also like to direct a big thank you to all authors contributing to the special issue. The Ocean and Society Journal has been an excellent and guiding collaborator for us. As an interdisciplinary journal, Ocean and Society integrates relevant studies from marine and maritime social science fields, promoting both theoretical and empirical research. Our thematic focus on blue gender aligns perfectly with the journal's mission, and for that we have been very grateful. So I will shortly today, after this introduction, give a background to our research network, which is the ground really for this special issue. And then after that, I will also try to answer questions of why do we need to talk about gender in blue sectors today. And after that, I will give the floor to Josefin and Ramona and Angelique to continue the conversation. So, in Europe, particularly in the Nordic countries, we are renowned for our strong commitment to gender equality, but we still perceive imbalances in both the maritime and marine sectors. So today's webinar will dive into how we can begin to close the gaps and ensure a more equitable future. By wanting to stand at the forefront of addressing gender gaps in blue economies, our gender research network, the Sisters in Arctic Blue, initiated the special issue we are discussing today. And the research network was initiated by a group of interdisciplinary academics from the Nordic countries, from Finland, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. And it was funded by the Nordic Council of Ministers Arctic Cooperation Program in 2021. Perhaps you see some familiar faces there. We have had some meetings together. Our focus from the outset was to lift and study gender-related issues in marine social science, especially then for coastal communities and livelihoods, especially fisheries. And as a network, our network has grown. We have also welcomed scholars from the maritime sector, which has contributed to broadening of our expertise and deepening of our research relations. Our mission over these 3 years has been to produce meaningful research and also to effectively communicate our findings. And perhaps most importantly, we have been looking to support early career researchers in the best way we have seen. Since the start, we have made significant steps, including publishing a report called Gender in Nordic Blue Economies. You can see the cover there up on the right-hand corner. We have organized the webinars and also then contributed to this special issue, both by editing, but also with co-authoring the paper Josefin is presenting today. So why do we need to talk about and lift gender in blue sectors? As most of you know that EU's Blue Growth Strategy aims to promote sustainable economic growth in marine industries, also fostering job creation and business opportunities while safeguarding marine environments. That's good, but however, this strategy has not fully addressed the persistent gender disparities with the blue sectors. Women's contributions remain underrepresented and often overlooked and undervalued in industries such as fisheries, aquaculture, coastal tourism, renewable energy, and maritime transport. Systematic barriers also continue to hinder women's full participation in the use, the management, and development of marine resources. But I think we will hear more about that in Josefin's presentation. So by focusing on the following conceptual basis of blue growth and blue economy in our call, special issue aims to highlight the importance of integrating gender perspectives into all sectors, ultimately leading to more equitable and sustainable marine and maritime future by achieving, for example, economic empowerment, sustainable development, enhanced resilience, social impact, policy effectiveness, and capacity building. The awareness surrounding this concept is increasing, yet we still lag behind gender mainstreaming within the blue sectors. However, collectively, as researchers and academic authors, we possess the ability to focus on the right objectives and bring the gender issues forward. Why is acknowledging the gender aspects significant? In contemporary societal research, it is crucial to recognize that every human cell in our bodies are sexed, reflecting biological differences, while every person is gendered, indicating the social and cultural dimensions of identity. This dual recognition enhances the value of equitable foundation by integrating gender thinking into all levels of the society. By incorporating diverse gender perspectives, researchers gain deeper understanding of the varied needs, behaviors, and attitudes of all individuals, which contributes to more effective and inclusive solutions. Moreover, a gender-balanced approach significantly enhances the societal relevance of research and innovation, ensuring that outcomes are aligned with the complexity of real-world situations and challenges. So, to illustrate, as we are here in the world of publication today, I just want to exemplify that the gender dimension and how underrepresented it is in the academic publishing. According to the forthcoming SHE report, these are figures to be published in 2024, shows that of all academic publications on EU level, we have only 1.94%, and worldwide even lower, only 1.74% with a gender scope. So therefore, we thank Cogitatio Press once more for lifting this important underrepresented issue and giving us the possibility to publish our special issue. While the completed special issue will be published in January, as José said, I will not go more into detail on the different articles here. Apart from the two presentations today, I can proudly announce that during this special issue can explore 5 more very interesting and for marine social science and gender equality important articles, not only from a Nordic perspective, but also geographically from Asia and South American viewpoints. So we have already online, we have 2 articles, one by Magnus Boström and the other one by Ramona Hägele and Anna-Katarina Hornrich, which is going to be presented today. So the common features I can still communicate between these contributions are of course that gender is a cross-cutting theme showing imbalance in blue sectors, both for marine livelihoods but also for maritime operations. We have examples from both sectors. So here we have the next part of the session today. We have Josefin is going to start and Ramona follows. So I think that we should get starting, and I just want to thank once again on the behalf of Sisters in the Arctic Blue Network that we have been able to collaborate with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kristina, and you've made my host job easy. So as Kristina has said, I'll call Josefin now to the virtual stage to present her paper Hindered, Overlooked, and Undervalued, Gender Equality in Nordic Blue Economies. This paper was also co-written by Kristina Svels, Magnus Bostrom, Madeleine Gustafsson, Kristen Onanian, Katrina Groningen, Milena Schreiber, Sunniva Solner, and Cecilia Osserman. So Josefin, go ahead, the floor is yours. You have about 10 minutes. And you need to unmute your microphone also.
Thanks, José. Can you now see it correctly? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Josefin, and I will present the paper Hindered, Overlooked, and Undervalued, Gender Equality in Nordic Blue Economies. And I have co-written it together with Stina and other members of the Sisters in the Arctic Blue Network that Stina has just presented. The aim of the paper is to introduce and discuss gender equality and also women's greater participation in the blue economy, and also to assess the status of gender research in the Nordic context. And the focus of the paper comes from the Nordic region. We recognize that the Nordic countries are highly regarded both internationally and regionally for their efforts towards achieving gender equality. And the Nordic region is also famous as a blue sector stronghold, and it has had a historical source and value of food, livelihood, and transportation. The most important maritime sectors and blue sectors today is aquaculture, fisheries, and maritime transport, which is the sectors that we have focused on in our paper. However, these sectors are heavily male-dominated, and there is still far until women's participation in these sectors will be equal to those of men. There are several strategies and policies in place when it comes to the blue economy and gender equality, both nationally and internationally. However, the success of these is unknown for now. Looking at the women's participation, though, across these three sectors, we see that there are around 2% of women in the seafarer workforce, in the global seafarer workforce. There are around 2 to 17% of women in the fisheries workforce, and around 15 to 35% in the aquaculture workforce in the Nordics. When it comes to our method, we used a purposive literature review where we reviewed peer-reviewed materials from the 1980s until present day. Our findings were then clustered into 3 categories. These are named Hindered, Overlooked, and Undervalued. However, there were some limitations to our study. For example, that while the author group speaks the majority of the Nordic languages, we do not speak all of them. We have also not accounted for non-digitized material. And there is also overall a lack of statistics when it comes to women's participation in the blue economy. For the first cluster, it is called Hindered, and this is when women's greater participation and their entry and retention in the blue economy faces barriers. This is showed in several ways. Some of the examples that we have found is when there is a hierarchy on board vessels, when there are still a usage of gender titles and not a shift towards non-gender titles, in work-life balance, and then in workplace bullying and sexual harassment. When it comes to overlooking, that's when women are not viewed as a legitimate part of the blue economy. This shows when women are, for example, not granted quota access, when their contribution to the seafood value chain is unrecognized, or when there's a lack of facilities and non-existing safety equipment, which could have life-threatening consequences. Undervalued is when women's contributions to the blue economy are not recognized. This is, for example, in invisible labor. Example of invisible labor is, for example, when women market of fish, or when they are do groundwork at home while the men are at sea, and this is not valued to the same extent as the man's work at sea. Another example is feminized work conditions. This is, for example, when women have paid and recognized jobs, but they are not valued to the same extent. For example, women working in catering on board ships the work might not be valued to the same extent as men working in the engine rooms. Some key takeaways from our findings is that, first of all, hindering, overlooking, and undervaluing does not act in isolations. There can be several instances of these mechanisms that occur at the same time. For example, when there has been an active choice to not adopt a non-gender title, when people keep referring to fishers as fishermen, while also there might be overlooking in the instance that safety equipment is not available for all body types, but for one type fits all, which might overlook then female body types, or when also when women's work are undervalued, as I mentioned earlier, for example, with the feminized work conditions. It's also important to acknowledge that these mechanisms are similar within the three sectors that we looked at, so fisheries, aquaculture, and maritime transport, in the way that they affect women's participation, which also is, we encourage that we look at these sectors more broadly. So to look at the future steps that we have found to achieve gender equality, we encourage a shift from policy to practice. This would be in implementing the current knowledge that we do have and to scale up best practices. For example, through learning from each other and to cooperate. And this is not just within a sector, but also to work cross-sector, but also cross countries. We also suggest several research efforts in our paper. Examples of that is to increase knowledge of the statistics of women's participation, but also to investigate policy implications and the success rate of policies implemented today, also to improve practices and to find strategies to combat sexual harassment. We also recognize that there is further need for advocacy and action. There needs to be more visible female role models so that younger generations feel encouraged and welcome to join the blue sectors. And there also needs to be an increase in women's access to education that is related to blue economy, both so that women will enter the blue economy, but also stay in the blue economy sectors. And lastly, there needs to be a social and cultural shift. The challenges that women and girls face are many in the blue economy. It affects their work life, their livelihoods, their career paths, and also personal safety. And therefore, social and cultural shifts are needed to secure a gender-inclusive blue economy that is beneficial for the wider society, but also regardless of gender identity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josefin, for your lovely presentation. I'll call up now Ramona Hägele to present her article, Transnational Intersectionality at Sea, Gender Appearance, Ethnicity, Age, and Marine Knowledge Production, which was also co-written with Anna Katharina Hornrich. So, Ramona, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm Ramona, and I wrote this paper together with Anna Katharina Hornrich, and basically I want to talk a bit about the background of the paper. Okay. No. So why did we actually look at intersectionality at sea, and how did this happen to take place in Germany and in Brazil? So my PhD topic is rooted in an interdisciplinary project, which is based in Germany and in Brazil. And it's an interdisciplinary project looking at marine carbon observations. So basically the overall goal is to expand and perfectionate marine carbon observations by looking at the Baltic Sea, the North Atlantic, and the Brazilian coast. And there are two ways of measuring marine carbon. On the one hand, this is done in merchant vessels. So usually then in the engine room, there's an autonomous system measuring marine carbon on the surface water. And then there are those yellow floats you can see here on the left. They look a little bit like missiles, which are huge autonomous buoys going up and down different water levels, and they have sensors on top, and every time they surface, they send their data via satellite to the data centers. And my research interest was more on a micro level. So how is knowledge produced in interdisciplinary and transcultural teams? What are potential benefits and trade-offs? And so the whole rationale behind it was to look at the micro level of things. So how is knowledge produced in those teams? What are everyday practices and routines? What are maybe different social or cultural processes, but also potential power dynamics. And my research is rooted in knowledge sociology and anthropology. So basically the question is, how do we know what we know? And if we want to know, we really need to look on the micro level of practitioners. And this is why for the past 3 years, I followed mainly natural scientists, marine scientists, but also crew members on merchant vessel and on one research vessel, and also technicians in German and Brazilian laboratories and at universities. And I conducted maybe really an explorative approach. So I went to the field as objective as possible, but we all know that usually this is something we cannot do. And then during these interviews, I realized that so many people talked about discrimination, sexual harassment, verbal harassment, and then through coding my data, this really became a pattern. And this is when we usually collect qualitative data, we are interested into these patterns. So I conducted interviews with 35 women and 47 men. No one identified as non-binary. And the content of these interviews were mainly knowledge production processes in marine carbon observation. So how do they interact with technology, with really the hard technology, those floats or different sensors, but also software or the laptop they're using. And also how do they interact with each other, with scientists, with non-scientists, with crew members, and so on. And then I analyzed it through the lens of transnational intersectionality, which is a theory which was invented already in the 90s, talking about that discrimination is usually experienced at an intersection of diverse social identity markers. So not only gender, but also at the intersection of age, nationality, and other social identity markers. And then we added this post-colonial transboundary experience of individuals, which are still felt until today, and especially in marine sciences. And what we found, some said it's not surprising, others said it's surprising, but unfortunately still 26 out of 35 women reported having experienced sexual verbal harassment. and 9 of them have also experienced physical sexual harassment. 3 men out of 47 have also experienced sexual harassment. And as you can see here, this is the co-occurrence of the codes, and the strongest intersection of discrimination and harassment was found at the intersection of verbal harassment, gender, and age. And the harassment was usually performed by older men, such as senior scientists, colleagues of scientists, and also crew members. And then we took a further step around these quantitative numbers and looked like, where did it occur? And the sexual harassment did not stop at sea, so not on a research vessel or on a merchant vessel, but also on coastal fieldwork, along beaches, in laboratories, at conferences and universities. So the 3 men, they were harassed at sea, and 17 women as well, and 9 on land. When we asked the interviewees then about their experience with it, like how did they cope, how did they deal with these experiences, mostly it led to withdrawal. So they decided for adaptation strategies, like changing the way they dress, how they talk. They also felt ashamed. They did not report the incidents, and some of them even left academia, stopped doing their PhD or other positions. A quite low number, like 9 people, decided for what we called emancipation process. So they started an active resistance against their harassers. They reported the incidents to the employer, or on the research vessel, for example, to the chief scientist, who then reported to the next level, the captain, who then reported it to the shipping company. So also what was really strong in our data analysis was this strong hierarchy at sea. And what does this mean for marine carbon observations and basically for marine knowledge production at sea? There's really a specific tension between scientists and non-scientists, which also broadens the gap between these knowledge systems, especially in Brazil. The marine sciences are strongly dependent by the Navy because the Navy has the vessels, so this is how they go to sea. There are not many research vessels compared to Germany. Germany has a really small coastline compared to Brazil, but has many research vessels, so it's also still connected to who has the money, who has the power, but also really a clash of cultures, as some interviewees mentioned it, between crew members and scientists. And we call this an intersectional dilemma because these diverse knowledges are needed to produce the science we need on the ocean, to know how our ocean is dealing with the climate crisis, for example, with plastic pollution and so on. But since these discrimination and sexual harassment lead to the loss of knowledges in terms of people leaving academia or leaving the marine sector, this also leads to a huge loss, which is crucial for climate change research. And our recommendations, I mean, there are already many recommendations out there and also a lot of research on that, on things to improve, but unfortunately, we are still there. So what we need definitely is an intersectionality, shared knowledge, and also an increased diversity at sea, not only in terms of gender, but also in terms of other social identity markers. And be it scientific employees or shipping companies, there are already trainings out there, but maybe there is a more proactive response needed, where you can really report these discriminations and sexual harassment, and where's there, like, again, a hierarchy on how to prosecute these be it racist or sexual or homophobic misconducts. And looking at my own research, I would have loved to expand this research using a mixed method approach with surveys on a more global scale, but also these interviews were highly important to really hear the stories behind it and to make them somehow visible. Yeah, thank you for now.
Thank you so much, Ramona, for sharing your research with us. I'll invite our guest discussant now, Angelique Brathwaite, for her perspective and insights as a marine ecologist, past head of the marine research for the government of Barbados, and co-founder and director of science and management at Blue Finance. Angelique, thank you so much for joining us today. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and to everyone who has joined us. I have to start by saying I am not a researcher in gender. As you heard, I'm a marine biologist, and actually when they asked me to be a part of this webinar, I was like, I think you have the wrong person. But it really got me thinking about gender, which honestly is not something I think about a lot. I am from a small island developing state. I'm from Barbados, and we've always had, I would say, very strong female role models. I say that, and I also say that, I mean, verbal harassment. I just saw it come up in the presentation. That's a fact of life in the Caribbean, right? So I was looking at my own personal journey, my own personal experience, and I felt at first that, well, I haven't experienced any of this. But in listening to the presentations before, I'm like, you know, actually you have, but perhaps some of it is such a way of life for you that you never even looked at it as harassment or anything to do with gender. I just wanted to start with that. I work in marine biology, which I think when I started, you could say it was male dominated, but I have to say that right now I'm at COP16 and in Cali, Colombia, and they are way more women here than men. And specifically in the area that I work in, coral reefs, in the 4 Coral Pavilion, women are dominating. So there has been a sea change somewhere along the way. I'm not saying that work doesn't need to be done. A huge amount of work needs to be done, but I'm seeing positive things happening, right? The sea change that has happened. So my personal experience, my personal journey has not been impacted. I would say I have not seen what I would consider to be a lot of major gender issues. I was the only female working as a co-pilot for Atlantis submarines at one point. And I remember, you know, they had no shorts to fit me, right? Because I was the only female. But I mean, we had a good working relationship and so on. I would say that it's only as director of science for Blue Alliance, so moving out of the Caribbean and moving in Zanzibar, soon to be Cape Verde, that this whole issue of gender for me really became an issue. In Barbados, I'm not saying it's not an issue. In Barbados, most of the people in the marine environment are male. And that is the interest. That is their interest. I haven't met many women who were interested in being fishers. I didn't meet many women who were interested in, you know, being owners of dive shops. I know women in both categories. I'm just saying that the majority of women did not have that interest. And I wasn't interested in digging deeper to find out why. I now am, because as director for science, and I will pull out Zanzibar as a country that really brought it to the fore for me. And I should just say that what we do at Blue Alliance is we work with marine protected areas to increase their financial sustainability and also to increase management effectiveness. And a part of that increase in management effectiveness is rangers, right? Is ranger duties, because the primary thing that we're doing is we're trying to minimize unsustainable fishing. And in Zanzibar in particular, and I think also because of the Muslim religion, not I think, because of the Muslim religion, we have 2 out of about 12, 14 rangers. 2 of them are female. So of course I saw them and I'm like, yeah, we need to talk. You know, what's going on here? And you know, they couldn't swim, which for me is very important if you're working in a marine protected area. I will also say that a lot of the population of Barbados cannot swim, and male and female. But that's a different issue. I'm focusing on Zanzibar. And when I asked why they didn't learn how to swim, it was about the dress, the swimsuits. They needed a special swimsuit to go in the water. They didn't have that, so it never, you know, was brought to the fore for them. So that started my journey into this thing about gender. And you know, of course, we got the right swimsuits, teaching them how to swim. We're going to teach them how to dive as well, and boat captaining and so on. But that also led to other women in the area who were seaweed. And this directly affects your ability to generate revenue, right? Because the women in Vumawimbi are seaweed farmers, and they farm on the reef flats. And they wanted to move into deep seaweed farming, and they couldn't because they couldn't swim. So again, it's the same thing. The deep seaweed is generating more money for them, but they couldn't move into it because they couldn't swim. So swimming might seem like such a small thing, but at least in the communities in which we were working in Zanzibar, I'm not saying the whole country, I'm not saying all of Tanzania, but in the communities that we were working, there was definitely the men could swim, but the women could not swim. So that's how I started to see it as, you know, as an issue, and to start working strongly in this area. I am not sure how much time I have. I am not sure if you would like me to continue, or I'm not even sure if I'm talking about what you want me to talk about. So someone needs to give me some guidance.
Please. Your time is about to end. You have about 2 more minutes, but for sure, your perspective and your personal experience is what we wanted to bring as well to this conversation today. You're doing great.
Okay. So I guess what I want to end with is people like me who come from areas that we have not really experienced this gender inequality, or we're not aware of it. These are the type of people that you really need to get to, because up until 2 years ago, I would have said, well, it's not really an issue, right? Because we need to get out of where we are and expand. It's only when I moved out of my comfort zone and experienced different religions, different cultures, different ways of being, women who are living on the poverty line and are responsible for their families and are inhibited because of their gender or their religion or ethnicity or anything else, that I really began to understand. So you really need to get to people like me, because prior to this, I would have thought it's all fluff, right? Like, this is not a real issue. So part of your push has to be to people like me. And I have to also give kudos to international organizations, because they're the ones that pushed it, right? They're the ones that told me when I was starting looking for grants and so on, that gender had to be a part of the program. And whereas at first I rolled my eyes, I'm like, why? I cannot get women into fishing. They don't want to fish. But it doesn't have to be that. You get women swimming. You get women diving. I became a dive instructor because I wanted Barbadians to explore the coral reefs with me and get to love them, and then they'd help me protect them. So it's all part of that same circle. I'm gonna stop here, I think. I'm gonna stop here. Thank you very much for letting me be a part of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Angelique, for your perspective and for your personal statements here in our webinar. It was certainly enriching to the conversation. We will then move on to our Q&A section. We have 2 questions already posed by our speakers in the Q&A box. I remind everyone who's attending right now that if you have a question that you want to address to any of the speakers of this webinar, please do it in the next few minutes before we sign off. The 2 questions that we have here are addressed to regarding Josefin's paper. So we have Anu Prinsman, who says thank you, and asks, as you went through literature since the 1980s, did you notice trends for improvement? Coming from Baltics, we would like to believe that Nordics are leading the world in these matters and pulling the rest along. And I'll follow with the next question so that you can answer them all together. How do you differentiate aquaculture from fisheries? So Josefin, if you wish to answer these questions, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for both questions. I know that Kristina is here as well as a co-author, so you're also welcome to answer. But regarding the first question about if there's been progression since the 1980s, we have one example that we mentioned in the paper, and it's how Norway has changed some policies to grant women access to quota, moving beyond, for example, if they're on maternity leave, that they keep their quota access beyond that. And that's a change that's been implemented quite recently. So we're not aware of the results and the outcomes of those policies, but it has been a step to secure quota access for women. But since this is not as documented, it's also difficult to find success stories, but we see that there are several steps taken to ensure the gender aspect of it. And when it comes to the differentiation between aquaculture and fisheries, I think that our differentiation is that aquaculture is farmed fish, but also seaweed, while as the fisheries is catch fish. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josefin, for enlightening our attendees. We are getting some compliments in the chat, but I see no more questions. So if there are no final remarks regarding the speakers, if there are no final comments that you wish to address, let's end this session off. I would like to start with thanking every single one of you who attended this webinar, all of the speakers as well, Ramona, Josefin, Angelique, and Kristina. Thank you so much for being a part of this special webinar. And in the last day of the launch of Ocean and Society, the newest journal from Cogitatio Press, this issue that we are discussing right now will be available in the beginning of next year, so somewhere in the midst of January. If you want to revisit this conversation, it will be available on the Cogitatio Press YouTube page. You can follow Cogitatio OAS on X to follow the latest updates regarding our publication. And we end here our Ocean and Society launch week. Thank you so much for joining us once again, and I hope to see you in event in the future. Bye.